Well, I'm Father Tom. Gerard Manley Hopkins once said that the earth is touched by the grandeur of God. And I believe that. Walk outside, look at the sky, look at the plants, look at the animal creation, look at the extent of the universe, but especially look at people. We're all touched by God, given a soul, a character, spirituality. We have so many capacities to love and to care, to make this a better world. But it seems to me as though those who actualize it the most are people of prayer, people who recognize that they need to work on their spirituality, people who learn how to be silent, be people of faith, be people of love, and be people of service. I was blown away, as everyone was, in the week that both Princess Di and Mother Teresa died. I'd like to focus in on a very special relationship that our guest enjoyed with Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa, well, Princess Di did many extraordinary things in her life. Her humanity, her struggles, her willingness to break out of very tight confines, to say she wanted her kids to learn how to sing, that she was in her position willing and able to cheerfully touch an HIV person. She didn't remove herself from the human story. She wanted to be a part of it. While she did that, her celebrity, or her sanctity, say, needed to touch base with the saint of our time, Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa, this is her business card. The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. The fruit of love is service. That she literally embraced a way of life in Calcutta where she would go to the gutters and pick up a person with maggots, clutch that person to her breast, bring that person to her convent, take out the maggots, wash the person down, put them in new clothes. This saint of the gutters touched all of our lives. At her funeral, when different people from different religions came and spoke about she is the saint of the world, how proud I was of her. The grandeur of God certainly was revealed through her. Joining me to talk about this very special saint, the saint of the gutters, the saint of our times, Mother Teresa, is my good friend, Shri Чинмой, spiritual director of the United Nations and a mentor to me and so many others. Shri, when you think of Mother Teresa, you met her, you talked with her. When you think of her, what comes to your mind?
Compassion and universal heart. She was the mother of infinite compassion, and she is, and forever she will remain a universal heart.
So many of us saw those compelling pictures. There's a picture of her holding a 1 pound, 10 ounce child, saying that she and her sisters want to live in such a way that before this child died, it would get a hug. The ability in the South Bronx, where when I walked around the South Bronx and the homeless people said to me, when they saw her pick up a child who had the Ebola disease, knowing that it could be contagious, they knew that she had heart. Many of us know those pictures and know the stories. Can you tell me a little bit about how a person begins in the spiritual life, how a person like her got to the point where she was so one with creation?
She was destined to be a supremely chosen child of the Savior Christ. And she not only saw in each individual the presence or felt the presence, but she actually took each individual as a living embodiment of the Savior Christ. Somebody is dying and she does not see the death, but she sees the compassionate face of her Lord. So each individual in her case is the Savior Christ. She served the poor. She served the needy. But while serving the poor and the needy, she felt that she was ordained to perform this supreme task. She is doing not for any individual. She is doing for her own highest source. She saw the source and felt the individual is the source itself. That is, we see the source, can see the source. But when she sees the living Christ inside a dying person, it is unimaginable. She is serving Christ, she is loving the Christ. She is not serving anybody else. So her compassion is unique. Her oneness with the compassion, forgiveness of the Savior Christ and the Mother Mary will not have any equal on earth.
There is a passage in Matthew's Gospel in which it says Jesus at the end time will gather everyone before him, and he'll say, I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was in prison and you visited me. You did it for me. Mother Teresa, or you did it to me. Mother Teresa would ask her sisters to hold up their hands, and she would say, if you want to know what the gospel is about, that's what it's about. You did it to me. In other words, she prayed that her eyes could see the presence of God in each person, the reality. Shri Чинмой had the privilege, as I had, of meeting with Mother Teresa shortly before she died. Members of his community went to see her. This woman, this saint, 87 years old, filled with all sorts of medical conditions, exposed to all sorts of diseases in the world, just went forward. 10 years ago, actually 12 years ago, I remember she talked with me about coming back from seeing Fidel Castro, and she said to him, Fidel, you're such a good boy. Don't you think it's time to come back? And then she talked at that time about opening up convents in the Soviet Union. And she managed not just to open up one, but actually 4 convents. But most recently, at age 87, she was talking about China. And I know the two of you talked about that. She really wanted to get to China.
She really wanted to have something in China. She told me at least 6 times to accompany her to China. She said, China needs light, China needs light. So I'm sure the absolute Lord Supreme from heaven will fulfill her desire through her sisters.
So the first lesson we learned is she was able to see God's life in each person. She didn't see the leprosy, she saw the life of God. And she knew that she used the term that she was a pencil in the hand of God. She was an instrument to be used by God. The second, you're suggesting that she's saying that we're called to introduce the light of God into circumstances where there may be darkness.
Yes, she tried to illumine darkness on the strength of her compassion, on the strength of her oneness. She felt that one has to come down to the level. If one is poor, then we have to come down to the poverty level and not remain at a higher state of consciousness. She felt that we have the complaints. The richer we are, the more we have complaints. But the poor people do not have complaints. They think it is God who is experiencing in and through them this suffering. They are not aware of it. But Mother Teresa was fully aware of it. So if we do not make complaints, we go forward. We see the better side of life, the purer side of life. So she was, in that way, she got tremendous satisfaction from what she was doing, that she is seeing the living presence of Jesus Christ, and also they are so receptive They were receiving the light that she was bringing down from above. They were receiving from her with utmost gratitude.
When she first moved into the Bronx, the convent that she embraced was in a very difficult section of the Bronx. There's a lot of poverty, a lot of drugs, a lot of homelessness, a lot of hunger. And what she did was, as one of her first steps, she had them take the beds out. The sisters lay on the floor. She did not want her sisters to have any privilege that the poorest person in the community didn't have. And she went on to say, how can I say to the poor, I understand them and I love them when I live differently than they? Each of her sisters had 2 saris in a bucket. In the spiritual life, you're indicating that sometimes the richer we are, the more complaints we have. Is it necessary in the spiritual life, or is it advisable in the spiritual life that we do with less, that we have less possessions and maybe more heart?
Certainly, each extra possession is an extra headache. The more you possess, the more you try to possess in the outer life, more than you need, the more problems you create. The simpler, the better. The road we need a shortcut road. There is a way to arrive at Rome faster than the other ways. So the simpler we are, the quicker we can arrive at our destination.
When Mother Teresa met Joy Susskind, the wife of David Susskind, and he was doing a documentary on her, she followed Mother Teresa for a week. And at the end of the week, she looked at her and said, Mother, where do you get this energy? Where do you get this spirituality? Where do you have all of this joy? And Mother looked at her and said, would you like this energy? And Joy said, yes. She said, receive the Eucharist. The place of prayer. You are a person of deep prayer. For those who are viewing us who may be moved by Mother Teresa's death, and may say, I would like to live more like she did, and would want to embrace the life of prayer. What is it that gives somebody energy and perspective and hope and love from prayer?
Prayer is everything. Prayer is our inseparable oneness with the source. Let thy will be done. This is the highest prayer. No prayer can be compared with this prayer. The Savior taught us. We wanted to identify ourselves with the vast. A tiny drop can maintain its own existence, separativity. Again, the same drop, if it is wise, it will throw itself into the mighty ocean, and then it becomes the infinite ocean. So prayer is the supreme secret for the finite, to not only to enter into the finite, but to become not only to enter into the infinite, but become the infinite itself. I, as an individual, if I pray that thy will be done, I pray to God with folded hands for the fulfillment of His will. He is infinite, He is eternal, He is immortal. But I am an ordinary, insignificant human being, a tiny drop. But the moment I cultivate wisdom that He is my all, if I give Him what little I have, then I become what He is. So here, when as prayer teaches us this secret of secrets, that give what you have, I have nothing. But that very nothingness, if I can give to God cheerfully, unconditionally, then God gives me what He is. So prayer is the secret of secrets, to become one with the absolute Lord Supreme.
For so many of us, though, if we were to live the way Mother Teresa would, she certainly saw the tougher side of life. She saw people hungry, people dying, people diseased, and yet she had great joy. I think for many of us, we'd get burnt out. We'd feel stressed. We might even, after a while, be pretty negative about life. How could she?
She did it precisely because, Father, she did it for not ordinarily for herself, for her higher self, which is all pervading. When I need something, if I have to do something for my for my leg, for my feet, my hand will not hesitate, because my hand knows it is part and parcel of this. My feet, my leg is part and parcel of my body. So she took humanity as her own, very own. If I take somebody as my own, very own, then I will not take it as sacrifice. I will take it as my bounden duty to cure the part that needs to be cured, to become one inseparably. She did not have any sense of separativity. She
was not separate. She was connected to God.
She was connected to God.
She
Therefore
was doing God's work in the world.
She was doing God's work, and also she feels it is God who is acting in and through her. God with the right hand, God is giving her the capacity. With the left hand, God is giving her to receive it. So God is giving her energy. God is giving her light. God is giving her compassion. God is giving her all the divine virtues that are needed to apply to the
So she was opening up her soul for the grace of God.
She was unfolding herself. She was blossoming. As she was blossoming, light, and before it was blooming, then she was blossoming. While she was blossoming, she became a fountain of affection, compassion, forgiveness.
And yet when she received like the Nobel Prize, she said, I am unworthy, but I receive this on behalf of those who are hungry and sick and poor and that.
And again, she did not want to have the party. She said, give me the money. The money, we usually have a party to celebrate the Nobel laureates. In our case, you give me the $7,000, $8,000, I will use it for a better cause, for the poor.
You know, she would go to somebody's house, they would offer her food, she would turn down the food, but as she was leaving, she said, could you make a doggy bag? I can bring this food to the poor.
See.
Extraordinary.
Sleeplessly and breathlessly, she thought of the poor, but she thought of the poor not in a sense of superiority or inferiority. It is part and parcel, inseparable one. The poor, the needy, one who needs her compassion, affection, love, and blessings, will deserve it. She feels that, it is her bounden duty. She is for those. Actually, she is for everybody. Like the sun. The sun is for everybody. It is up to me to keep the door open, to get up early in the morning, or to remain fast asleep. So she was open to all.
Isn't
she was
that
for
wonderful?
everyone.
This earth is really for everyone.
For
we
everyone.
are all loved by God. You had the privilege of knowing her personally and talking with her and that. She's obviously a saint. I know for myself, when I had celebrated Mass a few weeks before she died, when I went to see her, she looked at me and said, Father, please pray for me. And it was so humbling, because here is a saint asking me to pray for her.
Yes. Father, forgive me to say, in my case, what she does, she used to use her emotional aspect. I pray for you, must pray for me. She used to tell me, I pray for you every day, you must pray. On the phone she would say, Shri Чинмой, I pray for you, you must pray for me. And then she say, like sisterly, motherly affection, you have to pray for me, I pray for you. Do you not know that I pray for you, you must pray for me. And our first acquaintance was in 1975, Father, at the United Nations. I met with her in 1975 for the first time. The Temple of Understanding sponsored a meeting. All the religious faiths, about 20 spiritual religious leaders gathered together, and they asked me to offer a minute of silence. And then they asked me to give roses to each and every religious leader. I stood in front of her, and as soon as I stood in front of her, she was simplicity, purity, and humility incarnate. I went and offered roses to other religious leaders. They were like me. But when I went to her, it was like a drop merging into the ocean. So this was the experience I had.
You know, as great a person as she was, when you're in her presence, it was like, for me, being with my grandmother.
Absolutely.
who would say the rosary. When I was saying Mass, she was saying the rosary. She was praying for it, just as I'd see my grandmother, and she'd say, "What are you doing?" I say, "I have a test. I'll pray for you."
I had the same experience, exactly the same experience. Grandma is that she's for us in every aspect of life. Not only while we were in the seventh heaven of delight, but while we were swimming in the sea of sorrows, we're swimming in the sorrows, she's there. And when we were in ecstasy, she is there. She became inseparable one in all our day-to-day activities.
You know, sometimes in this world you're encouraged to be efficient and effective and all of that. And boy, she stands out to remind us that, you know, we're called just to be faithful, just to be loving, just to be engaging, to see the presence of God in every aspect. And she attained happiness. She attained sanctity. What a model for us. She took the words in the Bible and put them into her heart and lived those words.
She did not want us to be self-sufficient. She wanted us to be God-efficient. That is to say, depend on God's compassion, God's love, God's forgiveness. No matter how hard we try on our own to become a perfect human being, it will be impossible. But it is God's infinite compassion, forgiveness, that can one day transform our nature and make us good citizens of the world. She taught us to depend entirely on God's will, not on our capacity. We have little capacity, then we extol ourselves to the skies. Our capacity is next to nothing. It is useless. But to depend on God's compassion, God's forgiveness, then that is all His capacity, and we become one with Him. So she always taught us to become one with God's will, and not with our physical power, vital power, mental power.
A number of spiritual seekers created a song, and they're fellow travelers with Shri Чинмой, and we're going to have the privilege of listening to that song, and then you'll be able to hear after that song the special prayer that Shri has written for Mother Teresa. People throughout the world, grateful for Mother Teresa, are offering prayers and songs on her behalf. This document contains the special prayer of Shri Чинмой. Could you read your prayer?
Mother Teresa, Calcutta's soaring bird, India's sailing moon, the world's weeping sky, earth's tearing loss, heaven's dancing gain, the Christ's blossoming promise, the Mother Mary's harvesting pride.
We, all of us, have known a saint. We believe that she is with God. In the work, even though she is dead, her cause continues, the cause of sanctity, the cause of caring for the poorest of the poor. Consider making a donation to the missionaries of charity on her behalf. They will need your help. God bless you, Father Tom.